What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope you like this video. This is Surviving R. Kelly Part 3, Episode 1. So, listen, we went through Surviving R. Kelly Part 1, which really introduced us to a lot of the victims, a lot of the women's stories. At that point in time, R. Kelly had not been charged with anything. And we started getting really more specific details. I think a lot of us knew different things we had heard over the years, but to hear so many stories and to get a timeline and to really see, we got a lot of information on his background. Part 2 was sort of an extension of that. More women came forward, and as a result of the first documentary, so then we had more stories, more women, telling their truth, and then it went from there. Part 3 is dealing with what happened after that led to the trial, right? So we start off this part, we're talking about the Mute R. Kelly movement. And, the women who started the Mute R. Kelly movement, they were like, yeah, when he started basically saying it's too late to mute him and he can't be muted, that was in 2018. They were like, yeah, that's when we knew we sort of had him, because we have your attention. Like, you're talking about us, right? And in 2018, he did have that air, like, y'all really bringing up stuff from 20, 30 years ago. Like, it's too old. Y'all can't get me. And they showed a video clip of it where he was sort of taunting people like, that's old. You can't come for me, and basically that's that, right? We found out that the first trial that took place in 2008, it really was half done. A lot of the witnesses from the first trial said that they weren't treated well, that they almost felt like, that they weren't even believed, that it was just sort of thrown together. The case was just sort of thrown together. A lot of those same witnesses for this case that just happened said that it was a totally different experience. They were treated with so much more respect, and they felt believed. They felt like the prosecution believed their stories and wanted and supported that and wanted them to tell their stories. They talked about that this started in 1991 with the first victim, who was Tiffany Hawkins, and how she wasn't believed. It was sort of pushed aside. Of course, they blamed her. Then, of course, we have Aaliyah in 1994. And then 2006, I believe, the tape drops. We all know the infamous tape. And, when I look back on how that whole situation was treated, it would be treated totally different today than the way it was treated then. Like, I remember that tape circulating in barbershops, and it was being sold like you would buy your Madea bootleg movies and all of that at the barbershops. And I remember friends having viewing parties to watch the R. Kelly tape. And we knew that girl was underage. That was the rumor. Right? The rumor was this was an underage girl, and yet and still people were still treating it as, I don't want to say regular sex tape, but with two consenting adults, right? The New York case is different because they charged him with a RICO statute. And a RICO statute means that you are running a criminal enterprise, right? So it's not just about you assaulting young ladies. It is about you running basically running a business off of this. And that is why New York actually went first. They actually had a sort of like a fight over who was going to prosecute him first, because once they arrested R. Kelly, then he started getting arrested everywhere. He was arrested in Atlanta, he was arrested in New York, he was arrested in Chicago on charges. And so they sort of had to figure out who was going to try him first. Well, New York won. He actually was arrested in 2009, but because of COVID and jurisdiction arguments, the trial did not start until 2001. And like I said, New York got it first. And it was, again, the RICO statute, it allows them to be able to prosecute it differently. And because they're prosecuting it as a criminal enterprise, that he was running an actual criminal enterprise, they could call anybody they want to come and testify. So it doesn't have to be, oh, well, you can't call this person because the statute of limitations is up and that kind of stuff. You're not trying them for that case. You're showing a pattern of behavior that rises to the occasion of running a criminal enterprise. Again, remember, the RICO is what they got the mafia on, what they got a lot of the drug dealers on back in the 80s and the 90s and 2000s. Like, that is the statute. And again, I'm not charging you as sexually assaulting somebody. I'm showing a pattern that this is something you do as a criminal enterprise. I know I've said that a lot of times, but I need y'all to understand that. We're reintroduced to Joycelyn Savage's parents. And what I liked about the documentary is that they did not rehash everybody's story. They gave you enough to sort of, refresh your memory. And you said, okay, so we know we know Joycelyn. She's still with R. Kelly. That's the one as recently as last week, or 2 weeks ago, she said she had a baby by him through artificial insemination. And R. Kelly has said that ain't my baby. I don't know what y'all talking about. Joycelyn's father is even concerned about that as well, and even to the point where he's like, listen, I don't even know if my daughter's alive. I haven't seen her. So they are actually at the trial, and they said, of course, we're there. We want to see if our daughter is going to be here, but we're also here to support all of the victims. Like, we've built this community around this tragedy that is R. Kelly coming into our lives. And so we also introduced to, I call her the woman with the red hair. She has been following the trial, and she believes R. Kelly is innocent. And we found out that she's not just somebody that follows the trial. She actually has contact with R. Kelly, and she has had contact with Joycelyn and Azriel. She's taken them out to eat. She spent time with them. And she even got into an argument with Joycelyn's father, and he was like, you know where my daughter is? And she was like, I do know where your daughter is, and I'm not going to tell you. So we had that going on. And of course, we know that there's a whole group of people that do not believe that R. Kelly is guilty. They believe he's being railroaded, and this woman is one of them. And we never did get her name, but like I said, I'm going to call her the lady with the red hair, child. In December of 2019, we are reintroduced to, the next section we're reintroduced to Azriel. And we're, in December 2019, she came home. We know that Azriel was the other young lady that did the interview with Gayle King. And it was sort of, once R. Kelly got in trouble, it was really him and those two young ladies. And he said that, they never stopped fighting. Again, I'm not going to rehash their stories about how they got caught up with R. Kelly. You can go back and look at the first documentary if you want to get the breakdown. The first or the second documentary that gives you all of the details. But she actually called her father and was like, Dad, come and get me. And he said, I was in the hospital with my mom. I literally left the hospital and drove straight to the airport. I did not go home. I ain't pack a bag. My wife said, go. Like, she's saying, come and get her, go. So he got on a flight to Detroit. They live in Florida. And he said that once he got to Detroit, there was no contact. Like, he's calling her. She's not calling him back. And he's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Did I miss it? Did I miss the window? Can she not get out? Did she change her mind? So he booked himself a hotel, and she called him later on and said, all right, this is what time you got to be there. You got to come and get me, and I'll be ready. And he said, he rented a van, a van. And he said that when she called, he was there, and they ended up driving back to Florida. And he said she just slept. He said she slept until we almost got to Florida. And then she said, I want to drive. And then, she drove on home. And he said it's been challenging because, she left a child and she came back a woman, and a woman who had been through a lot of things, had seen a lot of things, experienced a lot of things. And so, we first had to accept the fact that she's no longer a child. When she left them, she was in college. She was 18 years old, I believe, when she left. Is Joyce? No. Sorry. She was 17. Joycelyn was the one that was in college. Azriel was 17. And, he said it's been challenging, but again, they've been working through it, and, they're just happy that she's home. And, seems to be doing well, or as well as can be expected. Their house was actually, remember, a car was actually set on fire. And come to find out that the person who is charged with the arson, is the cousin of R. Kelly's publicist, a man by the name of Michael Williams. Now, he confessed to it. I mean, he was arrested, so he did it. But not only what we heard was that the car was set on fire, but it wasn't just the car set on fire. They said that he had doused the whole outside of the house with gasoline. And Azriel's father was like, "How do you get so controlled? How does your mind so controlled by a person that you are willing to kill a whole family?" He said it was 6 people living in that house. It was myself, my wife, my kids. And how do you get to the point where you are willing to kill a whole family full of people to protect this man? We know that there were attempted bribes to witnesses for this trial. Remember the premiere of the R. Kelly, the first one, the premiere party, somebody called in a bomb threat. That man was just recently convicted of calling in the bomb threat. Then we are reacquainted with Faith Rogers. Now, I didn't remember Faith's story. I may have to go back and watch the documentary because I don't remember Faith's story. But Faith was 19 when she got involved with R. Kelly. She's one of the ones that got away as well. Her father is a pastor. Her mom was very instrumental in getting her. I can't remember. I honestly don't remember Faith's story. I just don't. But then we saw what the fathers got together to talk, Azriel's father, Joycelyn's father, and Faith's father. And that's when Azriel's father was telling the story of how he went and got her and how she escaped. And, they were saying, at least we have our daughters back. Like Joycelyn, Joycelyn's dad is still struggling with that and still waiting and hoping to one day see his daughter again or get his daughter back. It's been years, and at this point, it's going to be so much work. I mean, I'm not saying they're not willing to do it, but oh my gosh, can you imagine? And then they talked about women protecting R. Kelly and women, who've been helped. Not just that they support him saying, oh, R. Kelly's innocent, but the women who have actively, like the woman who put up his bail and the women who are actively supporting him and actively defending him. And one of their psychologists they talked about the psychology of Black women and how we're always we're always raised and taught to protect the Black man, and that the criminal justice system is so unfair to Black men, and you don't want to be a part of putting another Black man in jail. And they talked about the psychology of that. And we've been talking about that with this whole Meg Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez situation, as about, protecting the Black man and not wanting to see the Black man go to jail and being responsible for that, or people making you feel responsible for that. A lot of the survivors talked about the backlash that they got and how women, especially women, were coming at them about how could they do that to a Black man. And so that was, that was an interesting conversation. And then they went into what the survivors have gone through. Faith said that Faith's father said she had been assaulted. We know Azriel, her family was, we know that was through R. Kelly, but they talk about the backlash on social media, the backlash, the parents dealing with, oh, well, I mean, I've heard people say that to me, oh, well, I don't have any sympathy for the parents because they did that to their kids, or they took their kids to R. Kelly, or they set their kids up, or they allowed it to happen. And, the parents are dealing with that as well. And the kids, the survivors, are dealing with their scars and what they went through, and then have to deal with people coming at them, oh, well, you're lying, or you wanted it, or, you're just trying to put they talked about the idea of dealing with that. But then they started talking to the witnesses, and they talked about, again, their experience, the first trial versus this trial, and how much better they feel like the FBI in New York handled this case versus the other case. And a lot of them talked about having survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt that they did get out, that they did survive, and dealing with the guilt of that. I don't want to say remorse is probably not the right word. We found out that before the trial, R. Kelly fired his lawyer, a couple of his lawyers, and this is a lawyer that had been his lawyer for years, but literally a couple of weeks before the trial, he fired his lawyers. The belief is that there was an internal conflict about what was the best defense. And I guess those attorneys lost the argument or lost the fight, and they withdrew from the case. Some say they were fired, some say they quit. It don't matter, they weren't there. So he basically started his trial with almost like a whole new defense. I mean, there were lawyers that were already on the case, but he brought in new lawyers like literally right before that, and his defense team was described as being very chaotic and not prepared for what the prosecution brought. Literally right before trial started, the prosecution sent them 52 pages of witnesses, of a bunch of Jane Does that were set to testify. And for the first time, we are also going to hear testimony from John Does, who also spoke on being violated by R. Kelly. Now, again, we heard about this on the I think part 2 of the documentary. We heard about men being, or boys, I should say, boys being a part of what was going on with R. Kelly. So they testified at the trial as well. And the defense just wasn't ready. Their opening statement was 3 hours long, and by all accounts said nothing. They never addressed the actual charges, which was running a criminal enterprise. Like, they kept kind of coming at it as if it were a SA case or dealing with that. They never addressed the charges against him, and it was just very much all over the place. We hear Azriel's story, and you know, when the trial was going on, we got some of the story, but of course the most, you know, Azriel's story, she talked about how she was coached when she did the interview with Gayle King, and she apologized to Gayle King. And if you saw that interview, she talked about exactly, she gave Gayle King very specific examples of what, to show her when they were being coached and how that was going down, and that R. Kelly was behind the screen giving them, giving them hand gestures, and even when, he shut the interview down, right? She said he made them practice for days about what they were going to say and how it was going to sound. She presented her diary or her journal where she listed a list of rules that she had to follow while she was with R. Kelly. And it was, first of all, she had to call him daddy, which all of them talked about that they had to call him daddy. Then she talked about the rules as it relates to if he belched, acting young, acting happy, acting bubbly. She talked about when he would have sex and he would ejaculate on her, wouldn't allow her to go wash up. She talked about if he was not happy with her performance when he would videotape her, how he made her, do it again, how he would beat her, group sex. But probably the most disgusting thing that we all remember was the fact that he made her eat his feces, how he would smear his feces on her body if he was unhappy with her sexual performance. Very disgusting. Like, I don't even know any other way of saying that. And again, this is a story we heard from more than one of the victims. This isn't one isolated situation. Then we started seeing that Faith, she testified. And that's where part 2 cut off. I mean, that's where the episode cut off, is right before Faith is getting ready to testify. But she talked about being depressed, wanting to unalive herself, and just what she went through just to get to the point. She said, there were weeks where she would sit on the couch, and how she was uninspired to do anything, to go out, to, spend time with people, and, and again, dealing with the trauma of her experience. So we left off with her getting ready to testify. So I'll get y'all part 2. All right.